This is Shawn Crystal. Catch the INKPULP Podcast on Pharcyde TV Wednesdays at noon Pacific Time, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Come hang. Peace.
Yo, the price of games, rise up, stand the price, the loss of legs. My occupation, in essence, not complacent. Block the banquet, stop the computation. I'ma make the coda, fools just wanna make the quota. They can't rock around here, they need baking soda. This a hydra, no way they taking over. Lay them below the basement with snakes and cobras.
This is the INKPULP Podcast.
Yeah, what the buttons do.
All right, we're recording.
We're in that space now,
Don't
man.
bring yourself down to my level.
You just gotta hit the record button. Everything starts working.
Okay, I'm recording, and I see it recording. Okay, we're good. All right, so I don't have. So, welcome to the INKPULP Podcast. This is the first experimental.
It's absolutely experimental.
Version of what my podcast is evolving into next. Eric, you've been here since day one, and you've seen it evolve into many different forms. But
Devolve.
I think
Devolve.
You've seen it fall apart and then fall apart again.
No, I mean, I'm glad that, speaking quite selfishly, I'm glad that we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, right? Like, hey, what can we do so that we'll have an opportunity to just chit chat about primarily craft, right? Because that's the kind of stuff that you and I end up talking about anytime we get together someplace anyway. But again, quite selfishly, I look at this as an opportunity for you and me to just get on a call more consistently than we did during the quarantine times, right? Where we just kind of put our heads down and try to get to work on stuff. You with your lessons, you with your .com efforts, and me with my mini series, right? With my crowdfunding series. So I think this is sort of a good way to get back into the swing of things. You and I have what do we have? We have a couple conventions that we're going to end up doing soon, which is such a foreign concept to me now. The idea that, Jason Schachter, our art dealer, reached out to me and was like, hey, would you like to go do X, Y, and Z show? They want you guys to come and show up. And I'm like, that sounds like a weird thing that we don't do anymore. You
haven't done any since pre-COVID, right?
0%. My wife and I just recently had our second child. So not only was it, near impossible to go just because the nature of these shows weren't really, I don't know. I didn't feel like going into a space that I could almost, it felt like it was going to be forced being there. Like we were trying to make it work, as most of these conventions were trying, Right. But I also, realistically, there was no way for me to excuse myself from responsibilities from home just so I can go to a convention. That wasn't very smart.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that brings me back to when my kids were younger. You didn't have kids, and you were doing a whole bunch of shows and always asking me, "Come, let's go do this one and this one." Right. And I wanted to do all of them, but I couldn't.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny how. There's so much more. I mean, this is obviously hindsight, but I would remember those times when you would say, dude, I can't go because, X, Y, and Z family reasons. And that was when either I was still single or just, early into my relationship, pre-kids. And I can't stand those glasses. I can't stand those glasses. You're going to wear them because it's your podcast, so I'll stick around, I guess. But I can't stand those glasses, man.
Why don't you like them, Eric?
I don't.
Look, you're sitting. You're lit so well. You've got a much better camera.
So this is like how you're gonna.
I'm just trying. I'm trying to.
So okay, listen. If I promise to send you a camera, can you not wear those glasses anymore?
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, I'm gonna send you a camera just so I can never ever see those glasses.
All right. Again. Well, I'm wearing these glasses until you send a camera, then, and the audience can see how long this goes on for. And I'm happy with the glasses. I don't need the camera.
Clearly, you're happy with the glasses because any opportunity you can get You bust them out every single time.
Wait for con season, Eric.
It's so annoying. It's so annoying. Speaking of con seasons, we might get an opportunity to be able to do these podcasts on the road. So I think this is kind of nice, you know?
Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna want to. This camera that I got is so good. This new camera, I want to get another one too. And but yeah, even with one, we can do it. But we can do it with two. And there's an Mevo multi-camera app I can use on my laptop, and we can really make it look good. You won't have that fancy. You won't have your fancy setup though.
Yes, we can.
Perfect lighting.
I was looking for a good excuse to buy this streaming box that you can bring anywhere with you and hook up a traditional camera similar to the one that we have here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and all of these cameras, these guys, there's a new wireless HDMI signal that you can hook up to the camera, hook up to this box, and we can pretty much put this camera anywhere in the room if we were to chit chat, just you and me, group of friends. There's multiple HDMI ports in this little tiny box. It's a nice little investment, but if we're gonna do a few more of these as the world opens up, so to speak, it might be a good thing to write off for later.
Yeah, how much is that little box?
$1,200.
What's it called?
Shoot. I forgot, man. I'll send you the link after the show.
Okay.
Can you tell that we don't necessarily have a format because this is like the first one? I'm sure we'll ease into it and find even
Eric,
footing. It's just me talking.
This is my podcast.
This is the format.
It's never been anything but this. That's not true.
No, but exactly. I was going to say you're not giving yourself enough credit because the first couple of times that over X amount of years that we would do this, it was a tradition that I would open up each new season of the podcast by being, episode 1 of 20, whatever that was.
Right.
It was always a set of questions, or ultimately, I think if there was an umbrella of it was always you, sort of, looking through the lens of others as you're working stuff out for yourself, right?
Right. And I do have questions, and that's, honestly, as of the past year, my podcast has become very short episodes, 10 to 15 minutes in length, focused on giving academic content, like teaching craft things, because ink pulp instruction is where a lot of my energies are. So
congratulations, buddy.
Oh,
that's really amazing.
But this seems like a good combination of everything, where you and I can talk, we can do the interview, we can talk about craft, and we can bring back kind of what the podcast was and kind of make it something new and fresh too. So I like this idea. And when you texted me about it, I was in my head like, I need something, because I just felt like it was missing something. Something that I enjoyed about the podcast was gone. Not that I enjoyed what I was doing, but I think what helps my podcast succeed, part of that was missing. So I think this comes back to it.
Yeah. I remember you were very sort of adamant about making sure that the majority of those podcasts were done person to person. Obviously, that got hamstrung because of the quarantine and everything. So this may be a nice proxy, but also, and if I may introduce the idea, I think there is this preconceived notion of like, when you use the term podcast, it turns into something, It turns into this, I don't know what it is, because I think there's so many successful, quote unquote, successful versions of these podcasts. There's always this preconceived notion that, it must be this or it must be that. I guess format wise, it could, if you were to click the drop down menu on like these platforms, you would have to, categorize this as a podcast. But I don't know if it should be automatically handcuffed into that space. It's just a couple of guys.
So you think the umbrella term podcast kind of handcuffs it?
I think it sets up an expectation from an audience perspective, But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too narrow-minded in my thinking, because in my head, this isn't too dissimilar from the different shows that I watch out there. That's a bit more on the longer format, which I think that's what we're aiming for with this.
Yeah. But Eric, don't you listen to podcasts on like craft of filmmaking?
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
I mean, I think what you're saying holds true if we were to have this conversation 5 years ago.
Oh, sure.
But I think a lot has happened. I think COVID has the quarantine has made everyone change their relationship with podcast media. So I think that the term podcast became a much broader term during quarantine. I think it was before that, but I think quarantine opened people up to all these different formats. From my perspective, the term podcast is a show of any kind, typically self-produced. It can be an interview. It can be like I've done instructional stuff. It can just be someone babbling. Like, I don't know. Do you consider like these video game streaming people? Do you consider their shows podcasts?
I don't think so. I think they're
that's
just
a
like
good
streaming.
point.
You know, I think they're
That's different. They're streaming live. So does that change the term? I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, probably it's more for me. You know, not to think of it.
Well, look, do I need to change the name of the show now? Is that what?
So. I think you're good.
Okay.
I think I need to recategorize the umbrella that we're talking under to be like, that's the way Shawn has to think of it. I'm just gonna go talk to him like we're catching up.
Here, look at the screen. Let me ask you a question.
It's amazing.
This or this?
That's much better.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah,
Doesn't
I do.
That feel good?
I do. Yeah, it feels much better. Well, I mean, you and I are fans of the widescrreen presentation.
What is this? 16:9? Just a little bit shy.
It looks a little shy of 16:9. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's better than the squares that were like I felt like I was in a freaking Brady Bunch opening. You know?
Yeah. You know, Eric, I've kind of painted myself in a corner. I just realized.
What'd you do?
I can't take off these glasses because then I forfeit our bet. I forfeit on that. But I see the glare in them and they're really bad.
Yeah, man. Beyond just the technical thing that is like bouncing off of those glasses.
Yeah, all right. So look, it's episode 1.
You get a free pass, buddy.
There you go.
All right. So what were we talking about when I texted you this? What was front of mind when we were texting back and forth? I know for sure I was sitting on the toilet while I was doing it.
Well, you didn't tell me that.
Well, now I am. Okay. It's a bit of a confessional that I'm handing over to you. You take off your glasses, I give you something.
Okay. So you're asking me what the topic is today?
No, not necessarily. Like I was thinking about like what got us here, first of all, what sort of reignited or ignited the idea of starting to do this again. Because again, the format was different 3 years ago. The format was you would go town to town. You would go chit chat with a bunch of guys that you either knew, whose art you liked, combination of both, and you preferred it to be more, one-on-one, actually in person, because there was a lot of value to that.
Yeah, I agree. Now, that is another thing I think that has, I don't know if I've just opened my mind more or quarantine has changed, but I felt like when I started the podcast, if I were to use Skype, which was the thing at the time, and this is over 10 years ago.
Sure.
I think people's relationship with the computer was different than it is now.
That's a good point.
To record a very intimate interview in that setting seemed very foreign when they'd be distracted. But I've consumed so much media this way now. We all have you've got a really nice setup. I've got a good setup. We've got good mics and all that. And I don't feel distracted by looking into a computer. And I know you're not distracted by looking into a computer. No, so I think I've changed. And I think we've all changed as well.
Yeah.
I think quarantine was part of it. I think like having like work meetings over Zoom over and over and over conditioned us to treat this differently.
I mean, it's working in our benefit now, but generally that's kind of sad, right? Like the situation by which we've been indoctrinated to be able to talk to a screen, to a simulation of an image of somebody so that we can find some context, some level of connection with the person on the other end. I think one of the things that I thought was of high value, and it's not to diminish the conversation that we're having now. One of the things of high value, and I really appreciated your sort of adamant stand on it, was that you wanted to be able to talk to people face to face, because there's just that sort of, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the interaction. It doesn't mean that our interactions are disingenuine, right? It's not lacking in authenticity. But I think when you're in the room with somebody, and especially in your case, because you always manage to introduce alcohol into the situation, like it just feels looser. You know what I mean? Like there is a thing. This does go to what you were talking about, which is when we got accustomed, by we I mean like the people in general got accustomed to doing this version of interaction. I think that they started understanding how to be this version of themselves, right? But if you were to do this 10 years ago with somebody, like they'd be looking up here or something like that. You know what I mean? They'd be like, they wouldn't necessarily know how to conduct themselves in front of a camera. Technology being what it is, camera technology being what it is, that also, I think, adds to a better simulation of interaction, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Also, I do think that I noticed recording podcasts.
How's this mic, by the way? Is this all right?
Yeah, your mic is great. Do I sound okay?
I'm supposed to be like, yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Do I need to be closer like this? Do I need to hold the mic like I'm?
I don't think so. But this one in particular is really finicky.
Yeah, but when you're up on it, it sounds amazing. I don't know what mine sounds like.
No, you're fine. You're the area by which your mic is able to pick up a signal is built specifically for you to be about 3 feet away. This thing, as good as it sounds when I'm like a fist away to the side of my mouth, that's a sweet spot of this microphone. And sometimes I lose track of that. So I've got to be really up on it, like I'm eating like a Dole Whip.
Eating a what?
Have you heard of Dole Whip? How long has it been since you've gone anywhere near Disneyland or Disney World?
Oh, shit. A long time. My kids were
I know. That's a bad reference.
But even then, I don't recall.
I could have gone more lewd, but instead I decided I would say frozen yogurt ice cream.
Well, we can go lewd. This is our show now. But I'm going to say, in going back to what you were just saying, the type of interview I conducted when it was INKPULP Audio, I still think works better in person. This new thing we're doing, well, first off, you and I are so familiar with each other.
That's the other thing I was going to say, but continue. Go ahead.
So for what we're doing, talking craft, talking shit, and maybe having a friend on here and there, this is fine. I think there's an element of performance when, like, I feel like I'm in a recording studio. I've got a camera on me, a mic in front of me. When I would record the podcast in the room, when there was no video, first of all, and it was just a microphone, I can't tell you how many times the guest would say, "Oh my God, I forgot we're recording."
Yeah, that's great.
And that was great. But that's what that show was about. It was about more of a personal, intimate interview style show.
Sure.
I think this will be different, and not in a worse way, in a good way.
Yeah, I think it's I think that first of all, you're absolutely right. I think that there's our level of familiarity allows us to just be like, this is just me and Shawn on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like this isn't any different than if we're in the same room with each other, and just catching up or whatever. Right. I think that when people are keenly aware that there's a microphone interface, right, whether it be like the one you're using or the one that's built into their computer or whatever it is, right, and there's a camera on them, it's an added level of awareness that the old podcast sort of faded away once the talking started going. Right. I remember, where were we? I was just talking to Shachter about this yesterday. We were in that really posh, room that he had. Do you remember that? Was that Houston?
With Tim and the time we recorded with Tim and Klaus. That was Denver.
Oh, Denver. Okay, yeah. So I just remember being in that room, and the moment you hit the record button, it just went back to all of us just chit chatting. Nobody was sitting there looking for their opportunity to speak. It's just the way we talk with each other when we're sitting at the table. Tim is very deliberate and measured when he injects himself into a conversation, so I remember it being exactly like that. And then the other time that was really notable to me, not just because of the locale, that was a beautiful room that Jason had, that piece of shit.
Oh, yeah, he always gets that upgraded room.
I know, man. I don't know how that guy rolls. But anyway, so that was memorable, not just because of the situation that we were in, like, what was it, like 3/4 of the room were windows. Remember that? We're overlooking the city.
Yeah.
But it was also great because I'd never sat in a room doing that kind of a show with Tim Sale. And to hear Tim just talk about what we were talking about, I can't remember the subject matter, but I just remember how great it was to just have him talk,
Yeah, well, for me it was huge because I'd never had Tim on my podcast, and he had listened to my podcast and enjoyed it. And I'd never spent any time with Tim. I mean, he was always at shows, but Tim always has such a big line, and he's surrounded by people. And I wasn't familiar with him, like say you and Mateo were, so I was a bit intimidated. And I was that way with Klaus too before I met Klaus. So that was exciting for me to get Klaus, Tim, you, Jason, and me all in there.
Yeah. The last one, the other one that I remember going like, man, we're just chit chatting now, but it's so weird to be doing this here, is when we all went to Italy.
Yes.
Right. And you set up in the middle. Well, it was in Bologna for sure.
Yeah, we were in the lobby of the hotel.
We were in the lobby. Yeah. And we were just sitting there talking like the way you are now. Obviously, in person, but we were in a freaking different country, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but you were this close to pulling out all your hair because of the noise levels of the room, and just like, screw it, we'll just do it live, regardless of what we caught with the camera.
Right.
Your setup back then, or not with camera, the microphone.
Right.
That was pretty awesome. Those are two notable times when we recorded. I was like, wow, this is creepy,
and I want to get back to that. I mean, I'm working on building a setup. You obviously are too, that we can roll with to shows and trips and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking forward. We'll get back to that for sure this year.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to have it for when you and I meet up at the next show.
Yeah.
That way we can stress test it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think I pretty much have it. I just have a single camera. I have the laptop. I have mics that are USB, and we have StreamYard we can record on.
Yeah.
I also have ScreenFlow I can record on too.
We have options.
So the only thing I would, and if I can get another camera, we can have multiple views.
Yeah.
And then the app has a multi-camera option for the Mevo Cam. So
Easy.
if I do get another one of these, I'll bring that. But I think I have everything I need to do it now.
Yeah. Great.
So we'll do that. And I gotta get the intro at some point. I want to get a new intro for what we're doing, and then I can actually, like what Jason does when he starts his streams, is we can talk some shit. Then I can hit the intro and it can come up. And then Alan doesn't have to do anything after it's done. The intro's in it, and we just cut it off, and I can get it ready for release. There's no editing or composing that needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, this is our first one, so probably going to be things that we're going to be able to look back and go like, oh, we know how to optimize for that. But ultimately, I think one of the victories that we can take away from this is that we're doing it again,
Yeah, which is awesome. I've been excited about this, and I'm excited to talk craft too.
Oh, right. We're supposed to talk craft.
Well, I figured today would be an intro thing, but I did have some craft things on board if we
set it up, man. Tee it up. Let's listen.
Well, I guess the first thing I want to talk about is your leap into the craft of writing and creating your own story, and what that journey's been like for you.
I think if I were to take a measure with it, if I were to take a measure of it now, it's pretty exhausting, right? It's weird how if you step away from the table and look at the stuff that you've done, because you have that sort of zoomed out perspective, you're like, man, this is exhausting. But while I'm doing it, I'm not feeling any of that. So it's kind of operating on two weird levels, which is like I'm super enthusiastic about it, which I mean, ultimately I think what's great about it is that to me is a great sign, right? That I'm doing it right.
How do you maintain the enthusiasm if you're so exhausted?
I think it's because it's the difference between like running a race in which you're just like going through the motions of running and your brain is in a different space, right? Your heart rate escalates to an even pace, right? And now you're just running, all the slow and fast twitch muscles are working in coordination with each other, and right, there's 26 miles, right? This is a marathon, right? But once you get to the end of the race and all of that stops,
I got
right?
You.
Like suddenly you look back and you think like, man, I just ran 26 miles, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's something like that. Something similar to that. Just a little clumsy. Also because my phone went off. But like, it's clumsy. But I mean, so to answer your question, how has it been? It's been exhausting, but also invigorating in the best way possible. And I think long term, it's one of the most invigorating things, or it's one of the most worth it things that I can invest in. I mean, you have something similar by way of your instructional stuff, right? Like,
yeah, and that's kind of like where I was leading with that question. So I have, I'm just beyond busy right now. I've grown in a considerable amount over the quarantine, I'd say, but definitely over the past 6 or so months. Mainly, I'd say in the past maybe 2 months, something switched in me. I was always like, when I look back at how I operated, I was always operating from this place of fear that was motivated by lack of finances. And
Sure.
I realized, like, everyone who knows me, that's all they ever heard from, not all they heard from me, but they heard that over and over and over. And at some point I was like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just creating, like, I'm just nurturing this financial thirst, or not even nurturing it, but maintaining it by not changing my mindset on it. And I wasn't able to enjoy anything. Nothing I did. I shouldn't say nothing. Most of what I did was, I was not in the moment. I didn't know how to be in the moment.
Sure.
And all my work I was doing was hopefully getting me there. And lately I realized, like, I would be so busy back then. I would just be stressed and unhappy, and I'd be at my table drawing just pressure and stress. And then I'd get home and be like, well, I don't know how we're going to pay the mortgage in a few weeks. And I was just living in that place. And I just realized at some point, like, all the worry, all the stress didn't make anything change, and it didn't make anything better. In fact, it probably hurt me, hurt my work, hurt my spirit, and all that. So I am right now just beyond crazy busy. I'm doing a mural locally. I have INKPULP Instruction, which has become a big undertaking, and I'm happy that it has. And I've got the podcast. I've just got things everywhere. I'm really on top of social media now. I've learned how to use it better. I've learned how to enjoy using it instead of dreading using it.
Right.
So what I've learned is, under all this pressure and with all these things going on, I've learned to enjoy it. So like when I'm working on the mural in the mornings before the restaurant opens, it's like I'm creating a piece of artwork that's 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide, and I'm using my whole body to paint with, and that's just been a lot of fun. And so I'm finding joy coming back into my life. I'm finding like I've got this healthier mindset, and I look back at how I've been. I just feel like I don't know if I'd call it immature is the wrong word. Naive is probably a better word. I don't know, like, if I just lived in a reality in my head that I just was like a child in a grown-up's world, I think, up here.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think of how we conduct ourselves in that part of our lives. That's somewhat programmed into us, right? So I make fun of this, but anytime that the needle on the car, as far as the fuel, the gas is concerned, anytime that it gets near quarter tank, I start getting anxiety. And I think, like, where did I get that from? Like, where do I get that sort of feeling of, like, and you talk to anybody, you're like, quarter tank of gas, I'll take you. I mean, you've got to turn on a bunch of different systems in order for you to run out of gas in a second like that.
Right.
And I come to recognize it's like, from my mom. She'd always thought that. She'd always thought, Eric, we got to go fill up the car because it's the quarter tank of gas, and I don't want, for whatever reason that she had, I'd always thought, well, that's just how you do things. And you pick those things up and you incorporate it into your conduct, not even realizing that it may not make sense. It's just a thing that's sort of legacied into you, right? So I suspect, I bet good money that natural knee-jerk tendency of yours to worry because you do have bills to pay, you do have a mortgage to pay for, you do, like, and now you're worrying whether or not the body of work that your time behind your desk is well spent, not just in paying the bills, but obviously growing as a craftsman and all those kinds of things, right? Like, all of those things get rolled into one, and parts of that is again, legacied on. You take that thing on.
You're absolutely right. It's my dad. It's all my dad. Absolutely. But that's
not blame, right? That's just like identifying. I'm not pointing at your dad. It's your dad's fault.
I'm absolutely identifying. But he lived in fear of money always. But we had money growing up. I mean, maybe when I was little we didn't. But so I still don't have like financial comfort. But I'm wondering if, like, by shifting my mindset, does that make things change? Like, I'm really into this idea of attracting and manifesting. Like, you operate on different frequencies, and I would always operate on low frequency, and so I'd attract lower frequency things. So operating on a higher frequency, am I attracting higher frequency things? And and it seems to be so far that shifting that up here is working or about to work, I should say. Another thing I'm working on is I'm like, I went to there's a gallery downtown that's owned by an artist who I really like, and I have a lot of love for, like, juxtapose and the art scene that encompasses.
Sure.
And I come from that in a lot of ways. It's very different than comic book art. It's very different than, I mean, I guess it is fine art, but then more traditional Renaissance valued art. It's more modern, blah, blah, blah. So there's a gallery downtown. The artist that owns it, I really enjoy his work. And he also does murals all over the world, and I love his work. But we went to an opening about a year ago there, and it was just really inspiring to be in that space and see all this work from all these different artists around the world. And I said, I wonder what I'd have to do to get into this gallery. And I said to myself, I'm going to get in this gallery. So I introduced myself to the gallery manager. And then when I got home, I emailed him and just sort of put my intention out there. Like, this is who I am. This is where I come from. Here's some of my work. I would love to get into the gallery. And now I'm in it. So, I'm just thinking, like, shifting the mindset. And also I created INKPULP Instruction, and I really put a lot into it. I believe wholeheartedly that that my life will be very, I do see financial comfort. Hopefully sooner than later, but I see it coming.
Yeah, for sure. There's a thing that you said that was.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a thing that you said earlier, which is I'd come to experience it just as recently as working on this miniseries, right? Which is I've done multiple interviews, obviously, to hype up the book and make sure that there's awareness for it. And I'm very grateful for each and every single person that's brought me onto their YouTube show, which, by the way, is a resource, is phenomenal. Right. I wish we had this kind of stuff coming up, the sort of outreach that you could have just using this sort of personalized, quote unquote, personalized one-on-one interaction with a potential fan base or a fan base in general, right? Anyway,
right.
One of the questions that comes up is that, I've been labeled, and I think I love the idea. I would prefer that people refer to me as this. It's like, oh, Eric, you don't really work in comics anymore. You're more of a hobbyist, right? And I'm like, I love that idea. I love the idea that I'm a hobbyist in the comic book, and I'm making my own comics, and it's a hobby for me. Because I think one of the things I bring up in these interviews is whenever they ask me about my history and why I sort of fell out of it, it's because I started contrasting the thing that I really, really wanted to do for a living from way back in the day, which is like draw comic books. That's all I wanted to draw since graduating from high school, right? Once I knew, and my path kind of led me down there, but I didn't start off there, right?
Right.
Drawing the comic books, being involved in the comic book business in whatever capacity that they would have me, versus like the business of comic books, right? Which I wasn't cut out for. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about like the invoicing and the blah blah blah.
I know
but there's also this. There's also these. We talked about this in the past, but it's worth bringing up again, which is, I was never good with the kind of synthetic human interactions, right? I didn't care for it. It didn't land very well with me that I don't know if I'm talking to a person and they were being genuine or they were just talking because this is the kind of talk that they do for everybody. I can't remember who I was talking to recently, but they were saying how they would go from conversation to conversation, and it just happened to be that he would just coincidentally tandem with somebody else who he was in the previous conversation with. And so with each group of people, they would all end up talking about, he would say the same exact lines. You know what I mean? It's like the same sort of like...
He admitted to that? Like...
No, not him. He was witnessing it.
Right. Let me put a pause on you real quick, because there's a parallel that I think is occurring, and I did want to touch on this with you and I. Yeah. Because this is where I think my naivete kicks in. I believed everyone was a friend that acted like a friend, and everyone cared, and I was like, we'll all help each other, and this will be great. And I remember like doing everything I can to help whoever I wanted. But then when shit got rough for me, like, I mean, you were always there. Mateo was always there, but it was very few people, and people who I thought were truly friends just acted like I didn't exist anymore. And so that's when it really crushed my spirit. But that's where I feel like I was like a child in a grown-up's world. Doing that. So I've kind of come to a similar place as you, and I'm going to come back to you. I don't mean to dominate this, but my dream was to work in comics too, since high school. And it took me a long time to realize that my perception of people in the business and the business itself was not at all correct. So I got very bitter, very hurt, very angry at the industry, but never the medium. So everything I'm doing right now is to get myself to where you are, where I can produce my own books. But what I'm trying to build is some financial stability, so that I can have the time to do that. And if that makes me a hobbyist, great. But I also think now that option didn't really exist. It existed. It was just so much harder, maybe 10, 15 years ago, to go off on your own and be your own business and be your own publisher and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to that, right? The point that I was trying to make earlier was that I somehow fell out of love with the comic books business, at least the one that I wanted to get into, because I couldn't be part of it because I couldn't be successful at it. Right.
Well, that's what happened to me too. Yeah.
Right. But secondly, because I'd realized that in as much as it was about merit, in as much as it was about like just being able to draw well, there was also a social component to it that I wasn't comfortable with. I didn't particularly care. And you know me, like every show that we ever went to, that I ever hang out at the bar, I freaking went straight to the room, and just
right.
drew, because
But I understand that now. I mean,
I know.
like
So
lately, I'm like, oh man, I just that.
so again, so that sort of bitter aftertaste lingered for a long, long time, and it took me a while to negotiate in my head that I was like, actually, no, that's and this is really what's important, right? I think for me, building the mechanism to disassociate things from something, right? Because I think like, oh, because of this, it must also be this. Oftentimes, I've come to realize that's probably not true, right? This thing can exist in its pure form and still have me be very appreciative and joyful of it. And then the moment I disassociate it with that, like I unlink it from that bitter aftertaste, I go like, no, this is still good. So that's what brought me back to doing comic books again, which is I love drawing, right? And I love drawing comics. I love putting a challenge in front of myself that I didn't necessarily understood that I needed to cross, or to go and accomplish. But at its core, I love drawing comics. I am just now in I think a pretty unique, advantageous position to not have to do it under the terms of somebody else. So to your point, maybe we could have done this 10 years ago. It would have been a whole lot more heavy lifting. But sincerely, now there is an opportunity. The opportunity space is so much wider than the tools, right? The utility, the things that are available to guys who want to go and self-publish. Again, there's still a barrier to entry. Like oftentimes it's dollar related, right? But in as far as making your own comics and getting it in front of people, if that's truly your passion, the ceiling is so much further above your head than it was back when I was trying to break in and trying to I don't know, right? Like maybe even self-publish back in it. I would have never had this thought. But also, I never really understood the value, or at the very least, it was not necessarily I didn't understand the value. It was just never in front of me how much more important it is that I invest in myself than invest in the career of it, right?
Yeah.
Not realizing the doing of the thing eventually brings the thing that I want. Right. So one of the things that I'll use an example that just happened recently with Arcathena. So I was one of the things that I'd come to identify was that an opportunity space for me to get the kind of customer base trust, that equity that they extend to you, is to somehow narrow the divide between end of campaign and delivery, right? I'd realize, hey, that's something that not many people are really accomplishing right now, because they're going down the path of a traditional crowdfunding model, which is 5 pages, 10 pages worth of sample work. They launch the campaign, then they go and end up doing the book based on the money that they're raised. Fast forward X amount of months later, and then the book ends up in somebody's hands. And I'm like, I don't know why that's the only way to do it. I think there's a way for me to really narrow that divide and do the book way ahead of time, right? And by doing so, by saying, okay, I'm going to get a ton of these pages done before I even launch, right? Yeah. It really did set up sort of this, not necessarily awareness, more like, oh, that's. Why did nobody else do that? Or at least why was that not normal? And I'd realize, again, I'm in this advantageous position where I can do that, and it doesn't, the me doing it doesn't suddenly, doesn't impact the way I can keep my lights on in my house, right? That's why the hobbyist part comes in. But what had happened was, a company called Zest World, and I'm pretty, enthusiastic to talk about it. A company called Zest World reached out to me behind the scenes, and they are a subscription-based digital platform that's going to be handling the distribution for Arcathena on a subscription level, right? On a tiered subscription level. And they approached me and said, "Hey, is there any way that we can be the people that does this for you? We want to work with you on this thing. We want Arcathena on our platform." It's incredibly flattering. I was like,
"This is for digital distribution."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So So they approached me, and I said, "Whoa, this is really flattering. This is really exciting. We found a way to make it work." And just out of curiosity, I asked the founder of the company, "How did you find me? How did you find, like, was it word of mouth? Did you talk to somebody? Was it like, there's a couple people behind the scenes who they've also approached, creators behind the scenes who they've also approached." And I thought, oh, I have an association with that person. I wonder if they had recommended me or whatever it was. And they said, no, not really. We were just on comic book Twitter. And first of all, it made me laugh that there was such a thing as comic book Twitter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the old man. Like, I hear all these sub-Twitter titles.
Yeah. Freaking hilarious.
I still don't really understand.
Twitter to me is Twitter. You know what I mean? I look at it's all Twitter to me. But yeah, I think what it goes to show is that if you just really, for me, again, I think this is my brand of luck, which is I fall ass backwards into every opportunity that I've ever gotten. But it wasn't for the lack of being prepared in that space, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd realized, I'm having so much fun. And I think sort of just like whatever it is that's out in the universe understood how much fun I'm having, and people can see it.
That gets back to what I was saying. You were operating at a very high frequency, and you attracted high frequency stuff to you. Sure.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
That's a great way of looking at it. I mean, it's some of the most fun work that I've done. I can't even remember when, I think what's really keyed me into, hey, wait, this is fun. I don't know why I had such a apprehensive attitude towards this, was working with, he never corrects me. So I say Millar, people say Miller, but Mark Millar, right? I say Millar until he corrects me. I'm not going to change it, right?
Right.
So, working with Mark on that mini series for Miller World.
Yeah.
Anyway, working with him on that started sort of the avalanche, to make me go, right, this is fun. And it's because Mark is just saying, do whatever the heck you want. Here's a script, and I trust you as a creator. My sort of my comrade in arms, so to speak, right? Like my collaborator, to go and execute at a certain level. There's a couple times, actually, no, I can count on one time when he stepped in and said, hey, we need to have this one panel. But 99.9% of the time, he just said, do the thing that makes you happy. Do the thing that got you the job in the first place. And I was like, whoa, this can happen.
Yeah, it's crazy that is not the default anymore in comics.
Sure.
It kind of used to be the default in comics.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that really, like, I kind of dig my heels in on things, and just I'll suffer through anything if I just have committed to it.
Yeah, sure.
But the last few years of working freelance were just absolutely miserable, because every script I got was just an absolute disaster. There was no room to do what, like when I get a script, like if it's a good script, then you have room to be a storyteller.
Right.
If it's a horrible script, then you have to fix it, and then then you can then come in and be the storyteller. But if you're under deadlines, like I would just felt like my job became make this work.
Right.
And just the writers would celebrate all the successes, and their scripts were terrible. The whole craft of writing, it felt like to me, was just dwindling. I just, like, every script I got was just like, it got to the point where, like, I used to love doing thumbnails.
Right.
Like figuring out the storytelling, composition,
sure,
and all that, and like seeing it come to life. But then it just became so much work.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember working from David Lapham's scripts where it stopped feeling like work. It was like, oh, like it's all there. Now I can tell a story.
Yeah.
And so that really just, I mean, I stuck with it when I probably didn't have.
I mean, it's not too dissimilar to what I went through, although I don't know if I went through the grinder like you just described now. I just realized that the stuff that I was going after wasn't becoming as fulfilling as I thought it was. There was a picture in my head.
Yeah.
It was the way that was being executed. And I immediately, because I had, I lacked the maturity to understand the situation, I immediately pointed at the publisher and say, oh my gosh, why is this stuff not very good? Why are you guys not understanding? Blah, blah. Like I pointed a lot of fingers in their direction. Fast forward to now, and I look and I go like, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. It must be a very difficult industry to maintain, because number one, you don't have the right personnel to do it. Not even on that's the part that really puzzles me whenever it comes to, a fan base pointing at the creatives, right? The public facing versions of these titles, these efforts. And I'm like, they're not the ones you should be, forwarding your issues to. It should be leadership,
Right.
I'd come to in my maturation process of understanding how organizations work and how creative endeavors work. You have to populate, not just middle management, but upper management to be like, this is the standard that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to because it trickles down from us. And when you don't have a standard bearer, when you don't have sort of the point of reference of what excellence looks like, right? Everything gets disseminated from that person, right? And it just gets homogenized to whatever it is that the books end up becoming. So if there's any sort of, if you have a gripe, if you have an issue of how books are being written, how they're distributed, or how they conduct themselves publicly in these social media platforms, I don't look at them. I'm all like, oh, that's who you hired. It reflects poorly on your company, on your brand, and on your title, and on your creative efforts. But then I would go like, who's in charge over there? Yeah, which is always perplexing to me. And it's clear, it's not a difficult question to answer. So anyway, so I go down that emotional path of getting irate, of rolling my eyes and going like, why the heck is that guy being put in charge of these books? Why are these people messing it up? And then I'm like, I'm too old for that shit.
Yeah.
I get to a point where I'm like, I get perplexed, I get annoyed, because I do have an affinity for the mainstream. That's my upbringing. That's my childhood.
Sure.
But then I realize, like, screw that shit. That's not up to me, right?
Right.
I'm not getting mad. I'm not about to spend any more time,
exactly.
Trying to figure out why they put themselves in that position, because that's not my business. If they were to bring me in and ask me, hey, what do you think of this? Then obviously I'll spend a ton of energy trying to figure that out. But right now, like you said, you're busy with easily 4 or 5 things at any given time.
Right.
Why am I going to give any of that time getting annoyed at something that I have no business in, outside of just like, in an ancillary way, sort of on the outside window looking in.
Sure.
Right?
And I mean, I'm this busy now because I stopped putting my energies into that, what you were just talking about. I mean, I think about all the energy I spent, like getting upset and angry and bitter, and like it just lowered all of my frequencies down low, and I was just operating from a really bad place. But you're right, just turning it off and be like, that's them. Let me do me, and let me build my things, and then I don't even need to, like, I don't know what's going on in that world at all anymore. I mean, you used to always come to me asking me like, Shawn, so what's going on in the comics world? And I knew everything. I could tell you everything. And now I don't know, and I don't really care to know.
Yeah. It's, I get it. I invest just as much as my expectation out of it. I invest into like, I know what's happening over there. This event is happening. These characters are this way, blah, like all of those things. But that is as far as I go. It's just having an eye roll. If it's eye rolling, then I give myself the 2 minutes to do it. If it's celebratory, I give myself the 2 minutes to do it, because my day is populated with stuff that I can actually do something about. I can't do anything about that, right? Exactly. So, in the span of any given 24-hour day, I have X amount of time, X amount of hours to dedicate to my work, but then I have to find that really delicate work-life balance, and I'd rather not spend any more of it sort of giving my time, energy, and thought to something that doesn't even reciprocate,
Right.
So I'm out of that. I try to get out of there.
in fact, we're coming up on an hour, but I think you're like, if we're ending it, that's a good place to end it and a good place to pick up next time.
Yeah.
Work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because I have questions for you on that. Because I mean, I'm doing it better than I ever have, but you're still able to do it, produce a mini series while having a job, 2 young kids and your family. And so that's something I would love to dive into on the next one.
Yeah.
So how did we do today?
I think we did all right.
Yeah.
I think there was a couple. I mean, I laugh because I think when people hear like, oh, the Canete and Shawn are going to talk craft, the immediate knee jerk is to be like, how do you draw perspective?
Right. But Eric, that's what INKPULP instruction is for. They can go
Well, go to that.com and get your instruction on how to draw that in perspective. But craft is ultimately not just the the technical aspect of it too, but it's like the lived experience of what it means to be working in an industry. And at this point, graduating into a space where, at least for me anyway, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like it's something similar. Have appreciation for where we come from, but not getting, hamstrung by all the issues that we used to have with it, and just be like, we're just going to go do our own thing.
Absolutely. And we will. I mean, look, I do have episodes where I'm going to want to talk like, maybe not perspective, but I already have I wanted to ask you about storytelling at some time and directing action sequences and stuff like that. So I do want to get into that too. So we'll cover it all.
Yeah, we'll sprinkle this into those hey, how do you set up a shot kind of questions.
Right. Okay. So do we have a sign off? Like, do we have like an official?
I think we'll figure it out.
Here we go.
I'm not going to do that.
Go on.
I'm 0% of that. I'm not doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. This was fun. I hope everyone enjoyed. This is the first, and we have more coming.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm going to hit end broadcast now because that's how you end it. But hang out, Eric, for 1 second. This is the INKPULP podcast. This is the INKPULP podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.